Om Vishnu Namaham Om Shanti Shanti Shantihim. And the chapter 23 of the Buddha's teaching, the Buddha on the so-called creator God. I count your Brahma on the unjust among who made a world in which to shelter wrong. Jataka. The Pali equivalent for the creator God in other religions is either Ishra, Sanskrit, Iswara, or Brahma. In the three Pitaka, there is absolutely no reference whatever to the existence of a god. On several occasions, the Buddha denied the existence of a permanent soul, Atta. As to the denial of a creator God, there are only a few references. Buddha never admitted the existence of a creator, whether in the form of a force or a being. Despite the fact that the Buddha placed no supernatural god over man, some scholars assert that the Buddha was characteristically silent on this important controversial question. The following quotations will clearly indicate the viewpoint of the Buddha towards the concept of a creator god. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha speaks of three different divergent views that prevailed in his time. One of these was whatever happiness or pain or neutral feeling this person experiences, all that is due to the creation of a supreme deity. Ishraniman Hetu. According to this view, we are what we were willed to be by a creator. Our destinies rest entirely in his hand. Our fate is preordained by him. The supposed free will granted to his creation is obviously false. Criticizing this fatalistic view, the Buddha says, so then, owing to the creation of a supreme deity, men will become murderers, thieves, unchaste, liars, slanderers, abusive, babblers, covetous, malicious, and perverse in view. Thus, for those who fall back on the creation of a God as the essential reason, there is neither desire nor effort nor necessity to do this deed or abstain from that deed. In the Devadaha Sutta, the Buddha, referring to the self modification of nagged ascetics, remarks, if a bhikshus being experience pain and happiness as the result of God's creation, Ishrani Mannahetu, then certainly these nagged ascetics must have been created by a wicked God, Papa Kena Isharena, since they suffer such terrible pain. Kevadda Sutta narrates a humorous conversation that occurred between an inquisitive bhikshu and the supposed creator. A bhikshu, desiring to know the end of the elements, approached Mahabrahma and questioned him thus: where, my friend, do the four great elements, earth, water, fire, and air, siege, leaving no trace behind? To this, the great Brahma replied, I, brother, am Brahma, great Brahma, the Supreme Being, the unsurpassed, the chief, the victor, the ruler, the father of all beings who have been or are to be. For the second time, the bhikshu repeated his questions, and the great Brahma gave the same dogmatic reply. When the bhikshu questioned him for the third time, the great Brahma took the bhikshu by the arm, led him aside, and made a frank utterance. O brother, these gods of my suit believe as follows: Brahma sees all things, knows all things, has penetrated all things. So, Majjhima Nikaya, part 2, page 222, Sutta number 101, Digha Nikaya, Part 1, page 221, Sutta number 11, will refer and interpret more about the referred concept. Therefore, was it that I did not answer you in their presence? I do not know. O brother, where these four great elements earth, water, fire, and air cease, leaving no trace behind. Therefore, it was an evil and a crime, O brother, that you left the blessed one and went elsewhere in quest of an answer to this question. Turn back, O brother, and having drawn near to the blessed one, ask him this question, and as the blessed one shall explain to you, so believe. Tracing the origin of Mahabrahma, the so called Creator God, the Buddha comments in the Pattika Sutta. On this, O disciples, that being who was first born in a new world evolution thinks thus: I am Brahma, the great Brahma, the vanquisher, the all seer, the disposer, the Lord, the maker, the creator, the chief, the assigner, the master of myself, the father of all that are and are to be. By me are these beings created. And why is that so? A while ago I thought, would that other beings too might come to this state of being? Such was the aspirations of my mind, and lo, these beings did come. And those beings themselves who arose after him, they too think thus: this worthy must be Brahma, the great Brahma, the vanquisher, the all seer, the disposer, the Lord, the maker, the creator, the chief, the assigner, the master of myself, the father of all that are and are to be. On this, O disciples, that being who arose first becomes longer lived, handsomer, and more powerful, but those who appear after him become shorter lived, less comely, less powerful, and it might well be, O disciples, that some other beings on descending from that state would come to this state on earth, and so come. He might go forth from the household life into the homeless state. The Ganigaya, number 24, third page 29, Dialogues of the Buddha, third page 26-27. And having thus gone forth by reason of ardor, effort, devotion, earnestness, perfect intellection, he reaches up to such rapt concentration that with rapt mind he calls to mind his former dwelling place, but remembers not what went before. He says thus: that worshipful Brahma, the vanquisher, the all seer, the disposer, the Lord, the maker, the creator, the chief, the assigner, the master of myself, the father of all that are and are to be. He by whom we were created. He is permanent, constant, eternal, unchanging, and he will remain so forever and ever. But we who were created by that Brahma, we have come hither all impermanent, transient, unstable, short lived, destined to pass away. And thus was appointed the beginning of all things, which ye, sirs, declare as your traditional doctrine, to wit, what is has been wrought by an overlord by Brahma. In the Bhoridatta Jataka number 543, the Bodhisatta questions the supposed divine justice of the Creator as follows: he who has eyes can see the sickening sight. Why does not Brahma set his creatures right? If his wide power no limit can restrain, why is hand so rarely spread to bless? Why are his creatures all condemned to pain? Why does he not to all give happiness? Why do fraud, lies, and ignorance prevail? Why trumps falsehood, truth, and justice fail? I count you Brahma, on the unjust among who made a world in which to shelter wrong, refuting the theory that everything is the creation of a supreme being. The Bodhisattva states in the Mahabodhi Jataka, number 528. If there exists some Lord all powerful to fulfill in every creature's bliss or woe, an action good or ill, that Lord is stained with sin. Man does but work with his will. Jataka translation, volume 6, page 110. And chapter concludes, and the further chapters, chapter 24, will refers about reasons to believe in rebirth. Like, what are the reasons that rebirth exist? So let us learn about the concepts interpreted in this chapter that will help us to clarify our concepts related with reason to believe in rebirth. I recall my varied lot in former existence, Majjhima Nikaya. How are we to believe in rebirth? The Buddha is our greatest authority on rebirth. On the very night of his enlightenment during the first wars, the Buddha developed a retrocognitive knowledge which enabled him to read his past lives. I recall, he declares, my varied lot in former existence as follows: first one, life, then two lives, then three, four, 5, 10, 20, up to 50 lives, then 100, 1,000, 100,000, and so forth. And during the second was the Buddha, with a clairvoyant vision, perceived beings disappearing from one state of existence and reappearing in another. He beheld the base and the noble, the beautiful and the ugly, the happy and the miserable, passing according to their deeds. These are the very first utterance of the Buddha regarding the question of rebirth. The textual reference conclusively prove that the Buddha did not borrow this stern truth of rebirth from any pre-existing source, but spoke from personal knowledge, a knowledge which was supernormal, developed by himself, and which could be developed by others as well. And his first paean of joy, Udana, the Buddha says. Through many a birth, Aneka Jati wandered I seeking the builder of this house. Sorrowful indeed is birth again and again. Dukkha Jati Punna Punnam. Majjhima Nikaya, Mahasachika Sutta number 36, 1 to 48, Dhammapada, volume 153. In the Dhammacakka Sutta, his very first discourse, the Buddha, commenting on the second noble truth, states, this very craving is that which leads to rebirth. Yam tanha bhavika. The Buddha concludes this discourse with the words, this is my last birth. Now there is no more rebirth. Ayam antima jati nati dani punna bhavo. The Majjhima Nikaya relates that when the Buddha, out of compassion for beings, surveyed the world with his Buddha vision before he decided to taste the Dhamma, he perceived beings who, with fear, view evil and a world beyond. Paralokavaji bhavandashaveno. In several discourses, the Buddha clearly states that beings, having done evil, are after death. Paramaran, born in woeful states, and beings having done good are born in blissful states. Besides the very interesting Jataka stories, which deal with his previous lives and which are of ethical importance, the Majjhima Nikaya and the Anguttara Nikaya make incidental references to some of the past lives of the Buddha. In the Ghatikara Sutta, the Buddha relates to the Venerable Ananda that he was born as Jyotipala in the time of the Buddha Kassapa, his immediate predecessor. The Anathapindika Sutta describes a nocturnal visit of Anathapindika to the Buddha immediately after his rebirth as a Deva. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha alludes to a past birth as a Pesatana, the well-right. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha cites the names of some Buddhas who preceded him. Mahavagga, page 10, Samyutta Nikaya, volume 428, see chapter 6, and Majjhima Nikaya 1, 169, Majjhima Nikaya 2, 45, number 81, IB 3, 258, number 143, part 1, 111 could be referred to know more about Buddha and his teachings and life. An unusual direct reference to departed ones appears in the Parinirvana Sutta. The Venerable Ananda desired to know from the Buddha the future state of several persons who had died in a particular village. The Buddha patiently described their destinies. Such instances could easily be multiplied from the Tripitaka to show that the Buddha did expound the doctrine of rebirth as a verifiable truth. Following the Buddha's instructions, his disciples also developed this retrocognitive knowledge and were able to read the limited, though vast number of their past lives. The Buddha's power in this direction was limitless. Certain Indian rishis, too, prior to the advent of the Buddha, were distinguished for such supernormal powers as clairaudience, clairvoyance, telepathy, telethesia, and so forth. Although science takes no cognizance of these supernormal faculties, yet, according to Buddhism, men with highly developed mental concentrations cultivate these psychic powers and read their past, just as one would recall a past incident of one's present life. With their aid, independent of the five senses. Direct communication of thought and direct perception of other world are made possible. Here, the confession states about the existence of life on other planets also. Like with their aid, independent of the five senses, direct communication of thought and direct perception of other worlds are made possible. Some extraordinary persons, especially in their childhood, spontaneously develop, according to the law of association, the memory of their past birth and remember fragments of their previous lives. Pythagoras is said to have distinctly remembered a shell in a Grecian temple as having been carried by him in the previous incarnation at the siege of Troy. Digha Nikaya 291, number 16, C.V. Mr. G. Jennings, The Vedantic Buddhism of the Buddha. The case of Shanti Devi of India is a striking example. See the Boast, volume 13, number 2, page 27. Things will be explained by reading these further readings as suggested by the author. Somehow or other, these wonderful children lost that memory later, as it is the case with many infant prodigies. Experiences of some dependable modern psychist, ghostly phenomena, spirit communication, a strange alternate and multiple personalities also shed some light upon this problem of rebirth. In hypnotic states, some can relate experiences of their past lives, while a few others, like Edgar Cayce of America, were able not only to read the past lives of others but also to heal diseases. The phenomenon of secondary personalities has to be explained either as remnants of past personal experiences or as possession by an invisible spirit. The former explanation appears more reasonable, but the latter cannot totally be rejected. How often do we meet persons whom we have never before met, but who we instinctively feel are familiar to us? How often do we visit places and instinctively feel impressed that we are perfectly acquainted with those surroundings? William Words Atkinson and A.D. Walter Reincarnation and the Law of Karma. Psalms of the Brethren. Theragatha gives an interesting account of a Brahmin named Vangesa who won favor as a teacher by tapping on skulls with his fingernails and discovering thereby where their former occupants were reborn. Certain persons at times exhibit different personalities in the course of their particular lives. Professor James cites some remarkable cases in his Principles of Psychology. See F.W.H. Myers' Human Personality and its Survival of Bodily Death. The Vishuddhi Magga mentions as interesting incident of Deva entering into the body of Lemon. See The Path of Purity, Part 1, page 48. The writer himself, Van Narada, has met persons who were employed as mediums by invisible beings to convey their thoughts, and some others who were actually possessed by evil spirit. When in this hypnotic state, they speak and do things of which normally they are totally innocent and which they cannot afterwards recall. See Many Mansions and the World Within by Gino Serminera. The Dhammapada commentary relates the story of a husband and wife who, seeing the Buddha, fell at his feet and saluted him, saying, Dear son, it is not the duty of sons to care for their mother and father when they have grown old. Why is it that for so long a time you have not shown yourself to us? This is the first time we have seen you. The Buddha attributed this sudden outburst of her parental love to the fact that they had been his parents several times during his past lives and remarked, through previous association or present advantage, and that all love springs up again like the lotus in the water. There arise in this world highly developed personalities and perfect ones like the Buddhas. Could they evolve suddenly? Could they be the products of a single existence? How are we to account for personalities like Confucius, Panini, Buddha Ghosha, Homer, and Plato? Men of genius like Kalidasa, Shakespeare, infant prodigies like Ramanujam, Pascal, Mozart, Beethoven, and so forth. It was such experiences that led Sir Walter Scott to a sense of his metempsychosis. His biographer Lockhart quotes in his Life of Scott the following entry in Scott's diary for February 17, 1828. I cannot, I am sure, tell if it is worth marking down that yesterday at dinner time I was strangely haunted by what I would call the sense of pre-existences with a confused idea that nothing that passed was said for the first time, that the same topics had been discussed and the persons had stated the same opinion on them. The sensation was so strong as to resemble what is called the mirage in the desert and cylinder on board ship. Bulwer Lytton describes these mysterious experiences as that strange kind of inner and spiritual memory which often recalls to us places and persons we have never seen before, and which Platonist would resolve to be the unquenched and struggling consciousness of a former life. H.M. Kitchener, The Theory of Reincarnation, page 7. The writer also has made some persons who remember fragments of their past birth and also a distinguished doctor in Europe who hypnotizes people and makes them describe some of their past lives. The applied psychology, clinical psychology refers about such phenomenon where people could be healed by psychic power. Some Buddhist religions, volume 3, page 18 refers about these things. Could they be abnormal if they had not led noble lives and acquired similar experiences in the past? Is it by mere chance that they are born of those particular parents and placed under those favorable circumstances? Infant prodigies, too, seem to be a problem for scientists. Some medical men are of opinion that prodigies are the outcome of abnormal glands, especially the pituitary, the pineal, and the adrenal gland. The extraordinary hypertrophy of glands of particular individuals may also be due to a past karmic cause. But how? By mere hypertrophy or glands. One Christian Henkens could talk within a few hours of his birth, repeat passages from the Bible at the age of 1 year, answer any question on geography at the age of 2, speak French and Latin at the age of 3, and be a student of philosophy at the age of 4. How? John Stuart Mill could read Greek at the age of 3. How Macaulay could write a world history at the age of 6. How William James Siddige, wondrous child of the United States, could read and write at the age of 2, speak French, Russian, English, German with some Latin and Greek at the age of 8. How Charles Bennett of Manchester could speak in several languages at the age of 3 are wonderful events incomprehensible to non scientists. Nor does science explain why glands should hypertrophy in just a few and not in all. The real problem remains unsolved. Heredity alone cannot account for prodigies, else their ancestry would disclose it, their posterity in even greater degree than themselves would demonstrate it. The theory of heredity should be supplemented by the doctrine of karma and rebirth for an adequate explanation of these puzzling problems. Ceylon Observer, number 21, November 21, 1948. Is it reasonable to believe that the present span of life is the only existence between two eternities of happiness and misery? The few years we spend here at must but 5 score years must certainly be an inadequate preparation for eternity. If one believes in the present and a future, it is logical to believe in the past. If there be reason to believe that we have existed in the past, then surely there are no reasons to disbelieve that we shall continue to exist after our present life has apparently ceased. It is indeed a strong argument in favor of past and future lives that in this world virtuous persons are very often unfortunate and vicious persons prospers. We are born into the state created by ourselves. If, in spite of our goodness, we are compelled to lead an unfortunate life, it is due to our past evil karma. If, in spite of our wickedness, we are prosperous, it is also due to our past good karma. The present good and bad deeds will, however, produce their due effects and the earliest possible opportunity. A Western writer says, whether we believe in a past existence or not, it forms the only reasonable hypothesis which bridges certain gaps in human knowledge concerning facts of everyday life. Our reason tells us that this idea of past birth and karma alone can explain, for example, the degrees of differences that exist between twins, how men like Shakespeare, with a very limited experience, are able to portray with marvelous exactitude, exactitude the most diverse types of human character, scenes, and so forth, of which they could have no actual knowledge. Why the work of the genius invariably transcends by his experiences the existence of infant precocity and the vast diversity in mind and morals, in brain and spirit, in conditions, circumstances, and environments observable throughout the world. The footnotes tell like we have come to look upon the present as the child of the past and as the parent of the future. T.H. Huxley, Edison. Why do karma and rebirth explain? Number one, they account for the problem of suffering for which we ourselves are responsible. Number two, they explain the inequality of mankind. Number three, they account for the arising of geniuses and infant prodigies. Number four, they explain why identical twins who are physically alike, enjoying equal privileges, exhibit totally different characteristics mentally, morally, temperamentally, and intellectually. Number five, they account for the dissimilarities amongst children of the same family, though heredity may account for the similarities. Number six, they account for the extraordinary innate abilities of some men. Number seven, they account for the moral and intellectual differences between parents and children. Number eight, they explain how infants spontaneously develop such passions as greed, anger, and jealousy. Number nine, they account for instinctive like and dislikes at first sight. Number 10, they explain how in you us are found a rubbish heap of evil and a treasure house of good. Number 11, they account for the unexpected outburst of passion in a highly civilized person and for the sudden transformation of a criminal into a saint. They explain how profligates are born to saintly parents and saintly children to profligates. They explain how, in one sense, we are the result of what we were, we will be the result of what we are, and in an other sense, we are not absolutely what we were, and we will not be absolutely what we are. Number two, they explain the causes of untimely deaths and unexpected changes in fortune. And number three, above all, they account for the arising of omniscient, perfect spiritual teachers like the Buddhas, who possesses incomparable physical, mental, and intellectual characteristics. In this manner, this chapter concludes. The further reading tells about chapter 24, 25 will deal about the wheel of life, Pattika Sammupada. No God, no Brahma can be found. No matter of this will of life, just bare phenomena are all dependent on conditions, all Vishuddhi Magga. The process of rebirth has been fully explained by the Buddha in the Pattika Sammupada. Pattika means because of or dependent upon Sammupada, arising or origination although the literal meaning of the term is arising because of or dependent arising or origination. It is applied to the whole causal formula, which consists of 12 interdependent causes and effects, technically called Pakya and Pakyopan. The method of the Pattika Samupada should be understood as follows. Because of A arises B, because of B arises C. When there is no A, there is no B. When there is no B, there is no C. In other words, this being so that is, this not being so that is not. Im samim sati idam hotim ena ima samim sati idam na hoti. Pattika Samutpada is a discourse on the process of birth and death and not a philosophical theory of the evolution of the world. It deals with the cause of rebirth and suffering with a view to helping men to get rid of the ills of life. It makes no attempt to solve the riddle of an absolute origin of life. It merely explains the simple happening of a state dependent on its antecedent state. Ignorance, avijja of the truth of sufferings, its cause, its end, and the way to its end is the chief cause that sets the will of life in motion. In other words, it is the not knowingness of things as they truly are, or of oneself as one really is. It clouds all right understanding. Ignorance is the deep delusion wherein we hear so long as circling round, says the Buddha. When ignorance is destroyed and turned into knowingness, all causality is shattered, as in the case of the Buddhas and Arhants. In the Ittivuttaka, the Buddha states those who have destroyed delusion and broken through the dense darkness will wander no more. Causality exists no more for them. Ignorance of the past, future, both past and future, and the dependent origination is also regarded as avijja. Dependent on ignorance arise conditioning activities, samkhara. Samkhara is a multi significant term which should be understood according to the context. Here, the term signifies immoral, akusala, moral, kusala, and unshakable, anenaja, volitions, chetna, which constitute karma that produces rebirth. The first embraces all volitions in the 12 types of immoral consciousness. The second, all volitions in the 8 types of beautiful Shobhana moral consciousness and the 5 types of moral Rupa Jnana consciousness. The third, all volitions in the 4 types of moral Arupa Jnana consciousness. Footnotes tells about Tabbhava Abhidhammatam Sangha. See Manual of Abhidhamma by Narada Thera, page 360. Suttan Nipata, volume 730, page 14. Samkhara as one of the 5 aggregates implies 50 of the 52 mental states, excluding feeling and perception. There is no proper English equivalent which gives the exact connotation of this Pali term. The volitions of the 4 super mundane path, consciousness, Lokuttara, Magga, Chitta, are not regarded as samkara because they tend to eradicate ignorance. Wisdom, panna, is predominant in supramundane types of consciousness, while volition, chetana, is predominant in the mundane type of consciousness. All moral and immoral thoughts, words, and deeds are included in samkhara. Actions, whether good or bad, which are directly rooted in or indirectly tainted with ignorance and which must necessarily produce their due effects, tend to prolong wandering in samsara. Nevertheless, good deeds freed from greed, hate, and delusion are necessary to get rid of the ills of life. Accordingly, the Buddha compares his Dhamma to a raft whereby one crosses the ocean of life. The activities of Buddhas and Arhants, however, are not treated as samkara as they have eradicated ignorance. Ignorance is predominant in immoral activities, while it is latent in moral activities. Hence, both moral and immoral activities are regarded as caused by ignorance. Dependent on past conditioning activities arises a relinking of or rebirth consciousness, patte sandhe vinnanna, in a subsequent birth. It is so called because it links the past with the present and is the initial consciousness one experiences at the moment of conception. Vinana strictly denotes the 19 types of rebirth consciousness. Patte Sandhi Vinana describes in the Abhidhamma. All the 32 types of resultant consciousness, Vipakka Chitta, experienced during lifetime are also implied by the term. The fetus in the mother's womb is formed by the combination of this relinking consciousness with the sperm and ovum cells of the parents. In this consciousness are latent all the past impressions, characteristics, and tendencies of that particular individual life flux. It is well interpreted into the genetics. This rebirth consciousness is regarded as pure as it is either devoid of immoral roots of lust, hatred, and delusion, or accompanied by moral roots. Simultaneous with the arising of the relinking consciousness, there occur mind and matter, nama rupa, or as some scholars prefer to say, corporeal organism. The second and third factor, samkara or vinanna, pertain to the past and present lives of an individual. The third and fourth factors, vinanna and nama rupa, on the contrary and contemporaneous. This compound nama rupa should be understood as nama mind alone, rupa matter alone, and nama rupa mind matter together. In the case of formless planes, arupa, there arises only mind. In the case of mindless asana planes, only matter. In the case of sentient realm, kama, and realms of form, rupa, both mind and matter. Footnotes refers like radiant is this consciousness. Pavasaram idam chittam, says the Buddha in the Anguttara Nikaya, volume 1, page 10. According to the commentator, the Buddha was thus referring to the rebirth consciousness. Number 5, in the case of rootless resultants, ahetuka vipaka. Number 6, in the case of resultants with roots, sahetuka vipaka. Nama here means the three aggregates: feeling, vedana, perception, sanna, and mental states, samkara, that arise simultaneous with the relinking consciousness. Rupa means the three decades: kaya, body, bhava, sex, and vattu, seat of consciousness, that also arise simultaneous with the relinking consciousness conditioned by past karma. The body decade is composed of the four elements, namely, number one, the element of extension, pattavi; number two, the element of cohesion, appo; number three, the element of heat, tejo; number four, the element of motion, vayo. its four derivatives, upada rupa, namely, and number 5, color, vanna, number 6, odor, gandha, number 7, taste, rasa, number 8, nutritive sense, oja, number 9, vitality, jivityanandriya, and number 10, body, kaya. Sex decade and base decade also consist of the first 9 and 6 bhava and seat of consciousness vattu respectively. From this, it is evident that sex is determined by past karma at the very conception of the being. Here, kaya means the sensitive part of the body, vasadha. Sex is not developed at the moment of conception, but the potentiality is latent, neither the heart nor the brain. The supposed seat of consciousness has been evolved at the moment of conception, but the potentiality of the seat is latent. In this connection, it should be remarked that the Buddha did not definitely assign a specific seat for consciousness as he has done with the other senses. It was the cardiac theory, the view that the heart is the seat of consciousness, that prevailed in his time, and this was evidently supported by the Upanishads. The Buddha could have accepted the popular theory, but he did not commit himself. In the Patana, the book of relations, the Buddha refers to the seat of consciousness in such indirect terms as yam marupam nishaya, depending on the material things without positively asserting whether that rupa was either the heart, hridaya, or the brain, mashtishka. But according to the view of commentators like Venerable Buddha Ghosa and Anuruddha, the seat of consciousness is definitely the heart. It should be understood that the Buddha neither accepted nor rejected the popular cardiac theory. During the embryonic period, the sixth sense basis, Salayatana, gradually evolved from these psychophysical phenomena in which are latent infinite potentialities. The insignificant, infinite, seemingly small speck now develops into a complex six senses machines. Human machine is very simple in its beginning, but very complex in its end. Ordinary machines, on the other hand, are complex in the beginning, but very simple in the end. The force of a finger is sufficient to operate even a most gigantic machine. The six senses human machine now operates almost mechanically without any agent like a soul to act as the operator. All the six senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. I repeat, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind have their respective objects and functions. The six sense objects, such as forms, sounds, odors, shapes, tangibles, and mental objects, collide with their respective sense organs, giving rise to six type of consciousness. The conjugation of the sense bases, sense objects, and the resultant consciousness is constant, fajja, which is purely subjective and impersonal. The Buddha states, because of eye and forms, visual consciousness arises. Contact is the conjugation of the three. Because of ear and sounds, arises auditory consciousness. Because of nose and odors, arises olfactory consciousness. because of tongue and sapids arises gustatory consciousness, because of body and tangibles arises tactile consciousness, and because of mind and mental objects arises mind consciousness. The conjugation of these three is contact. Samyutta Nikaya, Part 2, page 70, Kindred Sayings, Part 2, page 50. It should not be understood that mere collisions is contact. Na sangati matto eva passo. Dependent on contact, feelings, Vedana arises. Strictly speaking, it is feeling that experiences an object when it comes in contact with the senses. It is this feeling that experiences the desirable or undesirable fruit of an action done in this or in a previous birth. Besides this mental state, there is no soul or any other agent to experience the result of the action. Feeling, or as some prefer to say, sensation, is a mental state common to all types of consciousness. Chiefly, there are three kinds of feelings, namely pleasurable, somannasa, unpleasurable, domannasa, and neutral, adukamanna sukha, with physical pain, dukkha, and physical happiness, sukha. There are altogether five kinds of feelings. The neutral feelings is also termed upekha, which may be indifference or equanimity. According to Abhidhamma, there is only one type of consciousness accompanied by pain. Similarly, there is only one accompanied by happiness. Two are connected with an unpleasurable feeling. Of the 89 types of consciousness, and the remaining 85 are found either a pleasurable or a neutral feeling. It should be understood here that nirvanic bliss is not associated with any kind of feeling. Nirvanic bliss is certainly the highest happiness. Nirvanam paramam sukham, but it is the happiness of relief from suffering. It is not the enjoyment of any pleasurable object. And dependent on feeling arises cravings, tanha, which, like ignorance, is the other most important factor in the dependent origination. Attachment, thirst, clinging are some renderings for this Pali term. Craving is threefold, namely craving for sensual pleasures, kama tanha, craving for sensual pleasures associated with the view of eternalism, bhava tanha, that is enjoying pleasures thinking that they are imperishable, and craving for sensual pleasures with the view of nihilism, vibhavatanha, that is enjoying pleasures thinking that everything perishes after death. The last is a materialistic standpoint. Bhavatanha and vibhavatanha are also interpreted as attachment to realm of form, rupa bhava, and formless realms, arupa bhava, respectively. Usually, these two terms are rendered by cravings for existence and non existence. There are six kinds of cravings corresponding to the six sense objects such as form, sound, and so on. They become 12 when they are treated as internal and external. They are reckoned as 36 when viewed as past, present, and future. When multiplied by the foregoing three kinds of cravings, they amount to 108. It is natural for worldling to develop a craving for the pleasures of senses. To overcome sense desires is extremely difficult. The most powerful factors in the will of life are ignorance, and craving, the two main causes of the dependent origination. Ignorance is shown as the past cause that conditions the present, and craving, the present cause that conditions the future. Dependent on craving is grasping, upadana, which is intense craving. Tanha is like a grouping in the dark to steal an object. Upadana corresponds to the actual stealing of the object. Grasping is caused by both attachment and error. It gives rise to the false notions of I and mine. Grasping is fourfold, namely sensuality, false views, adherence to rites and ceremonies, and the theory of a soul. The last two are also regarded as false views. Dependent on grasping arises bhava, which literally means becoming. It is explained as both moral and immoral actions which constitute karma, kama bhava, active process of becoming, and the different planes of existence, upapatti bhava, passive process of becoming. The subtle difference between samkhara and kama bhava is that the former pertains to the past and the latter to the present life. By both are meant karmic activities. It is only the kama bhava that conditions the future birth. Dependent on becoming arises birth, jati, in a subsequent life. Birth, strictly speaking, is the arising of the psychophysical phenomena. Khandannam patubhava, old age and death, jara marana are the inevitable result of birth. If one account of a cause and effect arises, then it is the cause ceases. The effect also must cease. The reverse order of the Pattika Samupada will make the matter clear. Old age and death are only possible in and with a psychophysical organism, that is to say, a six senses machine. Such an organism must be born, therefore, it presupposes birth. But birth is the inevitable result of past karma or action, which is conditioned by grasping due to craving. Such craving appears when feeling arises. Feeling is the outcome of contact between senses and objects. Therefore, it presupposes organs of sense which cannot exist without mind and body. Mind originates with a rebirth consciousness, conditioned by activities due to ignorance of things as they truly are. The whole formula may be summed up this. Dependent on ignorance arise conditioning activities. Dependent on conditioning activities arises relinking consciousness. Dependent on relinking consciousness arise mind and matter. Dependent on mind and matter arises the six spheres of sense. Dependent on the six spheres of sense arises contact, and dependent on contact arises feeling. Dependent on feeling arises cravings. Dependent on the craving arises grasping. Dependent on grasping arises actions, kama bhava. Dependent on actions arises birth. And dependent on birth arises decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Thus does the entire aggregate of suffering arise. The complete cessation of ignorance leads to the cessation of conditioning activities. The cessation of conditioning activities leads to the cessation of relinking consciousness. The cessation of relinking consciousness leads to the cessation of mind and matter, and the cessation of mind and matter leads to the cessation of the six spheres of senses. The cessation of six spheres of senses leads to the cessation of contact. The cessation of contact leads to the cessation of feeling. The cessation of feeling leads to the cessation of craving. The cessation of craving leads to the cessation of grasping. The cessation of grasping leads to the cessation of action. The cessation of action leads to the cessation of birth, and the cessation of birth leads to the cessation of decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Thus, does the cessation of this entire aggregate of suffering result. The first two of these 12 factors pertain to the past, the middle eight to the present, and the last two to the future. Of them, moral and immoral activities, samkhara, and actions, bhava, are regarded as karma. Ignorance, avidya, craving, tanha, and grasping, upadana, are regarded as passions or defilements, kilesha. Relinking consciousness, pati, sandhi, vinana, mind and matter, nam, rupa, spheres of sense, salayatanna, contact, phassa, feeling, vedana, birth, jati, decay and death, jara, marana are regarded as effects, vipaka. Thus, ignorance, activities, craving, grasping, and karma, the five causes of the past, condition the present five effects, phaja, phala, namely relinking consciousness, mind and matter, sphere of senses, contact, and feeling. In the same way, craving, grasping, karma, ignorance, and activities of the present condition the above five effects of the future. This process of cause and effect continues ad infinitum. A beginning of this process cannot be determined as it is impossible to conceive of a time when this life flux was not encompassed by ignorance. But when this ignorance is replaced by wisdom and the life flux realizes the Nibbana Dhatu, then only does the rebirth process terminate. This ignorance entails in dreary round, now here, now there, of countless births and deaths, but no hereafter waits for him who knows. Here the process interprets like causes or hetu, then effect or phala, consequences, vipakka. Let us discuss about causes hetu first. Causes are divided into two parts, passion, kilesha, and action, kama. Let us discuss about passion. There are like passions for ignorance, ajiva, and attachment, upadana. And actions, kama, like volitional activities, sankhara. Then action, kama, bhava. In the third one, consequence vipaka are the six sphere of senses, salvatana, and rebirth, jati. So, what are these classes? Like ignorance, avijja, volitional activities, samkhara, relinking consciousness, vinanna, mind and matter, nam, rupa, six spheres of senses, salayatana, contact, face, sensation, vedana, craving, tanha, attachment, upadana, action, kama, bhava, rebirth, jati, decay and death, jara, marana. And the next one, like ignorance, ajiva, volitional activities, samkhara would lead to craving, tanha, attachment, upadana, action, kama, bhava. Past causes, atita hetu. Then relinking consciousness, vinanna, mind, matter, nam, rupa, six spheres of sense, alayatana, contact, phassa, sensational vedana, would lead to rebirth, jati, decay and death, jara, marana, present effects of vittam, mana, phara. And the third one, craving, tanha, attachment, upadana, action, kama, bhava would lead to ignorance, advija, volitional activities, samkhara, and it may be the present causes of vattamanna hetu. The next one, relinking consciousness, vinanna, mind and matter, nam, rupa, six spheres of senses, salayatana, contact, phassa, sensation, vedana would lead to future effects, anagata, phala. The Chambers Buddha's Teachings, Volume 729, 730, will explain more about these things. So I conclude here with the next chapter will deal about the modes of birth and death. So chapter will be concluded here, and I wish in advance the happy Janmashtami to all of you. Let your consciousness rise up to the level that you can feel the bliss of divine present in your body, and you are presented into this omnipotent, omniscient world where God pervades all individual. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Namah. Om Bhurvasva Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurvasva Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurvasva Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurvasva Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurvasva Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhyo न प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om.